Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Senior Planet, and welcome to tonight's panel discussion with Senior Planet authors and book fair. So tonight we have 5 authors that we're highlighting, and I want to introduce our moderator, for tonight, Bonnie MacKay. Bonnie MacKay.
Thank you, everyone. I'm very, very happy to be here tonight. I'm going to actually introduce each one of our panelists and who are authors, and then what we're going to do after that is I'm going to have them each talk about their book. So the first panelist is Marcia Biederman, and she's the author of Scan Artist: How Evelyn Wood Convinced the World That Speed Reading Works. The next panelist is Mike Greenblatt, and he wrote Woodstock, Back to Yasgur's Farm. Pamela Hull, Moments That Mattered. Kate Walter, Looking for a Kiss, The Chronicle of Downtown Heartbreak and Healing. Laurie Nadel, the author of 5 Gifts, Discovering Hope, Healing, and Strength When Disaster Strikes. And I'm going to lead in and talk about my book first. My book is called Tree of Treasures: A Life in Ornaments. And my bit of my background is I was Vice President Fashion Director for Home for Bloomingdale's. And then after that, I went to work for MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art. So this was a completely different opportunity for me to write a book. So my book is called Tree of Treasures, and what I'd like to say is my tree is truly my tree of treasures, and it is absolutely a lifetime in ornaments. What is very interesting about my book is that I think that our tree is definitely our life. So every time you open up your ornaments and you put them on your tree, all your family comes back to you. Your family, your friends, your experiences, and in my case, my travels. And I also have a section on my tree that is devoted to my husband, who he gave me a wonderful assortment of ornaments. But in addition to that, I had an amazing opportunity that I was at Bloomingdale's and MoMA. I directed the Christmas ornament collection called Trimetry. And so I got to know a lot of the makers of ornaments, so that I not only, that's the other thing that I look at when I look at the ornaments, I think of the makers as well, and they were all very special to me. My tree was featured in the New York Times and in 2012. And it was an amazing opportunity because it was the first time my tree came out, if you will. And everybody kind of looked at the tree and said, oh my God, this is what she does. But it was an amazing experience, and I'm very, very blessed that after that I was asked to write a book. So, and it is about my 100 of my 3,000 ornaments. And it is also about the 66 classifications of all those ornaments. And I should also mention that some of the ornaments are only this big. So it's not like you're looking at a tree that has enormous ornaments on it. So it was a very, I'll go later on, I'll talk to you about what it was to make the tree, but, and make the book rather. But selecting 100 ornaments of my 3,000 was a very big thing for me to do. And I would like to just share one thing that when the book was published, I went into the living room where all my tree is, and I looked at all my ornaments, and all I could think of is that they were saying to me, what about me? Why didn't you choose me? And the ornaments that were on the tree, that were celebrated, were like, aha, yes, me. And the one that had the biggest ego was Elf, because he was chosen to be on the cover. So anyway, next.
I want to thank Senior Planet for inviting me. My name is Marcia Biederman, and my book is Scan Artist: How Evelyn Wood Convinced the World That Speed Reading Worked. And I'll begin by saying this came from a memory when I was 18 years old, back in 1968, I took an Evelyn Wood course. And the book is dedicated to my parents who gave me their hard-earned money for a worthless course. Because although you can be taught to skim, Evelyn Wood insisted that that was not what she was teaching. She was teaching reading, and that she had demonstrators who went on I've Got a Secret and said they'd read Gone with the Wind in an hour without losing a bit of the flavor. And obviously these were outlandish, extravagant promises, not to be confused with real study skills courses or advice that you don't have to read every word of everything. You can have permission to skim if you wish. This was something very different. In a way, it was the biggest hoax of the 20th century, and in revisiting it, I thought, why did we believe it, and why did we want to do that? Why did we believe Senator William Proxmire of Wisconsin, a very admired Democrat of the time, when he said that he could read 10,000 words a minute, and that he was preparing for his sessions in Congress by reading 3 heavy books about policy in his lunchtime? Well, it took me back to what was college like, what was the mid-century like. Everyone was nervous about everything. The Cold War was on when I had been in elementary school and Yuri Gagarin went into space, beating our space program. It was treated as a national tragedy. There was a book at the time called Why Johnny Can't Read that was very popular. It was really about remedial students. But then someone came out with a clever article titled Why Johnny Can't Read and Ivan Can. We were very scared of the Russians. My brother and I begged my parents to build a fallout shelter in our Connecticut home. My father put a few canned goods under the stairs just so we would shut up about it. Also, after I took the course, I didn't get the knack of looking at whole pages at one gobble. And yeah, actually, there was advice about the Evelyn Wood course, like, what do you do with a humor book? Read now and laugh later. So I'm going to pass the memory stick along to my colleague.
Hi, my name is Mike Greenblatt, and my book is called Woodstock, Back to Yasgur's Farm. It's about a weekend I had 50 years ago, and I interviewed 32 of the participants of that weekend, and I think that the reason we're still talking about that particular weekend had really nothing to do with the music and everything to do with the fact that 500,000 people in one place at one time, and the food ran out, and there wasn't enough water, and there wasn't enough bathrooms, and then a monsoon ripped through the field on Sunday, and there was no police. The second biggest city in New York for 4 days had no police for 500,000 people, and there was not one reported instance of violence. Think about that. That had never happened before, and it certainly hasn't happened since, and I dare say it couldn't possibly ever happen again. But hey, we were the peace and love generation, right? Well, we proved it those 4 days. I went there with my good friend Neil, and we came prepared for 4 days of camping. And we brought everything, clothing, food, books, pot, water, everything. Yet, we left the car to go to the stage. We never found the car again. So there we were in a shorts and a t-shirt. And when the monsoon came, we were drenched. And then it got really cold. And we were hungry and thirsty and had to go to the bathroom. And it wasn't fun anymore. Yet we couldn't leave. Our spot was right in front of the stage with 499,998 people behind us. And we were trapped, but the book is ultimately optimistic and filled with my stories. I fell in love twice. We got to go swimming. I met a girl in the lake, and it's interesting in that you think about it, if you meet a girl at work, at the library, in the park, you're usually not naked. So this was a very special 60s tableau of all these girls that were in the lake. And I'm like, I couldn't believe it. So, of course, I had to divest myself of my clothing and throw it on a rock and jump in the lake and meet the girl and go, hey, we got a great spot right in front of the stage. You want to come back? And she goes, no, I got to go back to my boyfriend. And, of course, I was crestfallen. But the point is, that was the one girl I fell in love with. There was another one. But I did do interviews with Carlos Santana and Graham Nash and members of Jefferson Airplane and Canned Heat and Sha Na Na and all of these artists. Plus, I found the guy that did the lights and the sound. I even found the boys that... I'm done. Okay, I will now give the floor to my colleague to my left.
Hi, I'm Pamela Hull. This is my book, Moments That Mattered. We need more than 3 minutes here. We like to talk a lot. So what is a moment that mattered out of a million moments that make up our lives? I'm not interested in writing about the big events, the marriage or the train wreck or the near close calls, those that are constantly in our consciousness all the time. I'm interested in the small moments that pass us by, that we don't even realize at the time, but that in hindsight prove to be actually life-altering when we think about it. Those moments that truly shaped our values and transformed our character and made us kind of who we are and who we became. As we live our lives, these moments just spring up. They're haphazard. We don't really notice them at the time. But we need to kind of look at it. I divided the book up into childhood, youth and young adult and adult, showing how different things affect us at different times of our life. Why are we like it? Why are we angry at a sister all our lives or a parent? Why are we shy or aggressive or whatever? Why don't we take advantage of opportunities? I mean, these things all stem from our life experience. We can look to the past to find out actually who we are today if we ever take the time to kind of do that. I think, how often do we ever do that? How often do we ever take the time to let that moment unfurl? And how often do we assess what we have become and where we have come from? And then after that kind of information, if we ever acquire it, is are our characters set? Where do our decisions and character come from? Are our traits and characters set, permanently reactive to just events? Or can we excise and mold and redesign ourselves? I say yes, we definitely can, because I think as long as we're living and we can breathe, then we certainly can take our life to a higher level. So I just want to read this quick thing that came before the prologue. It's a prologue before the chapter. Sorry, glasses off, book high. It starts with a musing and ends with recall, and that is all there is at the end. Ribbons and photos and trinkets in hand or drying on shelves. How shall we carry the wisdom, the love, the sorrow, and the pain? It is not fair. It is too much. We cannot hold it all, and yet we do. We hold it all. So I'm a little more serious than these fellows to my right, but I think you can learn a lot about yourself from pause, remembering, and reflecting. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kate Walter, and this is my book. It's called Looking for a Kiss, a chronicle of downtown heartbreak and healing. It came out when I was 66. It's my first book, even though I've been writing my whole life. It's a memoir, so it's about a specific period in my life, and it's dealing with this really horrible breakup I went through when I was 57, and my lesbian lover of 26 years left me. And I wasn't expecting that. I thought we had problems, but I thought we would fix them. So anyway, I was working on this book for a long time. I mean, many years, many drafts. And what I realized was that the more interesting part of the story was the healing part. How did I fix this up? And I realized that was what could be relatable. So among the many things I did, I saw a lot of psychics, tarot card readers. I was in therapy. I joined a radical church. I did a lot of yoga and chanting and what else. And the other thing that was really interesting about the breakup was that I always had this stormy relationship with my mother, like a lot of people do. And my mother was so there for me during the breakup that it healed my relationship with my mother. So that's all in there. So that's part of the healing, not just that I healed myself, but I healed the relationship with my mother. So that, I think, is a powerful part of the book. Because, my parents were very conservative. It had trouble with me being gay. This was a long time ago. But then, my mother really came around, and she was totally there for me. So, I mean, the book, and then I start online dating when I'm in my 60s and trying to write the profile and going on dates with various people. So that's where the title comes in, Looking for a Kiss. And basically the book ends with me realizing that I'm okay, even if I don't find anybody else. I'm okay being single, I'm okay with me, and it would be nice to find someone, but I don't need that. So I really learned a lot about myself when I was actually writing the book, okay? And as I was telling someone before, originally I thought the book should begin with the book should end with the breakup, but then I realized, no, it's much more interesting to go into what happened afterwards, because that's relatable. And the book is dedicated to, I think some of you will like this, dedicated to women who have been dumped after 25 years. Okay, so I think there's a lot of people who can relate to that, straight, gay, bi, doesn't matter. So that's pretty much the story, and I'd be happy to talk later about how I went from writing articles and essays and opinion pieces to writing a book.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for being here, and thanks to Senior Planet for inviting me to be on the panel. My name is Dr. Laurie Nadel, and this is my book. It's called The 5 Gifts, Discovering Hope, Healing, and Strength When Disaster Strikes. I'm very proud that Dan Rather wrote the foreword to my book. Dan has been my mentor since the late 1980s, early 90s, when I started working at CBS News. In my 20s, actually for 20 years, I worked in journalism. I worked in TV news in London and New York, and I was a field reporter in South America, covering adventure stories and also covering the state of siege that followed the military coup in Chile in 1973. And that is kind of the backstory to this book, because as a result of what happened, I came back with post-traumatic stress disorder. And after 20 years of working in newsrooms, I'm like a baby boomer's nightmare. I burned out covering the Iran-Contra hearings and ended up on long-term disability. And when I came out of disability, I had a chronic fatigue virus. I realized that I couldn't go back into journalism. I was a single mom at that point, and I was pushing 40, and I figured I was unemployable. So I went back to school through independent study, and in 1991, I opened my practice here in the village, helping people deal with trauma and PTSD, which was at the time, there were very few people here in New York that were looking to address that. I have been in practice since 1991. I had a program for teenagers whose fathers were killed in the World Trade Center for a few years. Then I lost my own home to Hurricane Sandy. My home was in Long Beach, New York. It was my house of 20 years. And I led support groups for people on my island for 4 years. And then I moved to Florida, where I found this amazing publisher. They do Chicken Soup for the Soul. And excuse me, worked on the book. And at the time the book came out, the Parkland shooting happened. And so I was invited to work on a team of debriefers, working with first responders, fire rescue people, and also the teachers at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. So a lot of that work is in this book. The 5 gifts which came to me after I lost my home, which we need to recover from any long-term catastrophic event, are humility, patience, empathy, forgiveness, and growth. And these are found in all of the world's religions, all spiritual traditions in many different countries. And so the book has many interviews with people who have survived all kinds of events, including the tsunami in Thailand, somebody who worked in Rwanda during the genocide, and my own experiences here. I think we have collective memory, and I hope this book can be helpful in understanding ours.
Aren't those wonderful books? I just thank the authors for being here. I'm very, very impressed with their work, and it's so wonderful to hear everybody talk about it. When I was preparing to be a moderator, I was reading a lot of their excerpts, but to hear them speak about it in person is really touching and moving, and I thank you all for coming. It's wonderful. We're asked a general question by our leader, Aaron, and I'd like that to be something I want to talk about next. The question is, in the process of writing your book, do you think your memories changed, or did new memories come to you? Sorry, say it again. In the process of writing what I'd like to talk to you about now is Aaron, our leader, had given us a question for all of us to answer. And the question is, in the process of writing your book, do you think memories changed and or did new memories come to you? I'm going to start at the end and Marcia and say what she has to say. Right, Marcia, right. Sorry.
That's right. Well, I research, so because I'm not writing a memoir or something based on my own life, I am a biographer, and somebody has likened that to breaking into another person's house. So I think that while I'm writing, I almost want to substitute my own life with my subject's life. I get very, very absorbed with my subject. Evelyn Wood was from Salt Lake City. She had a life very unlike mine. She was a religious, active participant in the Mormon Church. So I enjoyed looking into her life and finding out more about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, spending time in Utah, walking in her shoes.
Michael?
Well, in the course of my research for this book, with the 32 interviews, of course, a lot of people told me stuff that did jog my memory. For many years, for instance, I thought, wait a minute, did I really go swimming at Woodstock? And I had seen the movie when it came out in 1970, but I forgot about it. And so I had to go back and see, was there really a lake? Did I really go swimming? Well, the answer is yes. And there were other things, too. And sometimes you tell yourself a story, and that story over time becomes your reality. And you think about it, and you take it as a matter of course. So I had to go back and think each and every story that I told from my personal viewpoint, did it really happen? Because now I'm writing a book about it. I can't be making up stuff. So I did, and I went back and I took out some stuff that maybe that didn't happen, so I didn't put that in. But I do have memories. It's an interesting question. I have memories from, like, I was born in Brooklyn, and I left for Newark, New Jersey at the age of 3, but I swear I remember in Brooklyn following a trail of blood on the sidewalk where 2 guys were having a knife fight, and we followed the trail of blood to the candy store, and we went in the back, and that couldn't have happened. I'm 3 years old. But maybe it's one of the things that I told myself. But rest assured, the stories that I told in this book are true.
Pamela?
Well, of course, my book is all about memories, and it's a tricky subject. And the only way I could deal with it was, as I said before, dividing it. Childhood, youth, young adult, and adult. I didn't put in mature adult yet. I thought I'd save that. But the thing is that when you start thinking of something that happened when you were 10 years old, when it happened at 10, it was very, it was something that you remember was acute, you reacted to it, you had certain emotions around it. But but when you think about that same incident when you're 20, or when you're 40, or when you're 60, it's entirely different each time. The event may be the same, but the emotions around it and the way you look at it. Maybe you weren't right when you thought you were right. Maybe it was somebody else's fault when you thought it was your fault. And so the wonderful thing about this, as I write about it, is as you look back, and now we have a wisdom and we can look at it some way, you can sort of deal with some of the things. If you had difficult emotions, you can make an amend to somebody that you may be wronged, or you can have the discussion that you were afraid to have then, or you can open up about it, and you can reboot your emotional history is what you can do. I mean, so many of us walk around with things that we've suppressed or things that we haven't expressed, even the joy. I never told her thank you, I never did this, and this kind of thing happened. And we have a chance, if we take a moment, to be introspective. And I write how this happens as stories. It kind of reads like fiction. We have a chance to make our lives better in a way and get rid of a lot of stuff that we've been holding on to that we don't need. So memories are very good to go back and look at, even the same one periodically, because as you change, your thoughts about it will change.
Kate?
My book is pretty recent. It takes place from 2005 to 2010. So I didn't have to go too far back. I mean, some of it was almost happening while I was writing it. But there is one flashback scene that takes place in the late 70s when I came out to my parents. And I knew that this was going to be a dramatic thing. And so I actually wrote about it at the time. I remember I was taking the train back from New Jersey to New York, and I was writing about what had happened. So I caught the dialogue almost exactly word for word, because a few people said to me, wow, did they really say that? Did that really happen? And I was like, yes. And I saved it. So I knew that someday I was going to write about this. So it took a long time. But finally I got to put this scene somewhere, and it fit, of course, into the book. But as far as like going way back into time, I had taken notes at some pretty dramatic points in my life. So I had those to refer to. But again, when you're writing about all these things, you get insights into them that you didn't have when they actually took place. So I think that's the thing that changes. The insights change.
Oh, thank you. As somebody who can't remember where she put her keys, memory is kind of a little bit of a tricky subject. But I'd like to share a story with you that was told to me by an editor of, I think it was Penthouse, back in the day, and it concerns Bob Woodward, Pulitzer Prize-winning author of All the President's Men. So Penthouse was excerpting Woodward's second book. So he was invited to come to New York and have lunch with the editor. And the editor said, do you have any questions? And of course, Bob Woodward, Pulitzer Prize-winning author, had one question, and it's the question we all have. Those letters that people write to Penthouse, are they real? And so after lunch, the editor took Bob Woodward up to this room, and there was a mail cart coming in, and there were letters piled everywhere. They were on the windowsills, they were on bookcases, they were on desks, and there was an intern sitting there and reading them and logging them and opening more, throwing letters on the floor. And the editor said, well, Bob, you see, this is the room where we keep the letters. And as you can tell, they're real. We don't know if they're true, but they're real. So I think that memory, as we get older, there's a piece of it that they're real to us, especially emotional memories. But when we really get down to the fact-checking of our memories, sometimes that can be very tricky. So in writing this book, in chapter 6, I felt very strongly that I needed to write about my own experiences in 1973 and 1974, working in a war zone, and because most of my stuff and my notes were destroyed by Hurricane Sandy, I actually had to go back into the memory and step into it and reactivate it, because all of our emotions are stored as molecules in a part of the brain that's called the limbic system. It's also where all of the organs of the body are connected. So we talk about that as the part of the brain that's the mind-body regulator. And so when we want to remember something, or we want to access the emotions that we felt at a particular time, we can actually access the molecules that are stored in the emotional archive. And because it was very upsetting experience, even though it led to my doing a lot of human rights work for the next 10 years. There were a lot of details that I would have preferred not to have to remember, but I was really grateful that I was able to kind of step into that experience again and to be able to describe it. And then I fact-checked the accuracy of the dates and the quotes with the friend who had taken me in as a young reporter in Chile. So I think the other piece for this book for me is really about helping us to understand collectively these collective memories that we have. And I know that for me, probably the first major national event that we would say was a catastrophic event would have been the assassination of President Kennedy. And we had Vietnam. Vietnam influenced my life, on a very personal level. In many ways, it changed the direction of my life. We have the civil rights movement, we have the women's movement, coming all the way up to the last 5 years, the last 3 years. And things are changing very, very quickly. And we're not used to living in a climate that is volatile and turbulent. We don't really have the skill set for that. We're very impatient. We want everything to go back the way it was. We don't like discomfort. We've had it pretty easy, I think most of us, compared to people, even let's talk about people who grew up in England during World War II, like some friends of mine, or people who are Holocaust survivors. And I think that we have a lot to learn from those people. We have a lot to learn from indigenous people. We have a lot to learn from people who have dealt with long periods of adversity, because that can change our collective memory, and it can change also how we come together for the future.
Thank
So-
you very much. That's
Thank
great.
Okay.
Thank
I was
you
just
very
stopping
much.
there.
Thank you. I'll talk about my experience. I am not a writer, so it was the first time I was writing a book. And so my relationship was to my ornaments. And I had to look at the 100 ornaments and think about the memories so that I could write the copy for the book. And I can't tell you how important that was to me and the memories that came back. I guess the one thing that I have to cite, which was probably the most powerful for me, is that I thought about my tree growing up, and that it was very important to my parents. We would always pick out a fresh tree together. My father and mother would bring it home. My mother would prepare the tree stand, and my father would do the lights. And then my mother would decorate the tree. And I was given 4 ornaments that I could decorate the tree with. It was very interesting, though. The only ornament that my father could put on the tree was the carrot. And I'll show you this picture. This is the carrot. And the carrot, the story of the carrot is that the carrot was given to my father by his father, who was a ventriloquist and star in vaudeville. And my father was a cartoonist. And he also did voiceovers for radio and television, animal voices. And in addition to that, he also was a ventriloquist. So when I was writing the book, all of a sudden, these memories came back about the tree talking to me, and that all the ornaments had a different voice. And when I would walk through and look at the ornaments, they would speak to me. The angel on the top of the tree would talk to me. My little clown would talk to me. And sometimes I thought it was very private, that I was the only one having the conversation, but he was watching. And throwing his voice, he was very powerful. He could throw it a pretty far distance. What happened was that when I was 9, the tree went quiet. And that's when my father died. And so it was a very powerful time for me. And I will tell you that in writing the book, all of a sudden this all came back to me. And I was able to write about it, but I also realized that I actually had the talent my father had given me to mimic voices. And I didn't really think about it that much until I was writing the book. So it's a different feeling and a different experience, but I wanted to share that with you. That was the most important memory for me. I have another question for everybody, which was, what was the most important rediscovery you felt after completing your books? And I will start with Kate.
Rediscovery?
Yes.
I realized that I could be on my own. I didn't need to have a partner. I actually liked being on my own. I realized I was a lot more independent than I thought I was, and that I had kind of gotten locked into a relationship where I was playing a certain kind of a role. And so in a way, even though the breakup was horrible at the time and hard to get through, in a lot of ways it was very liberating. So now I feel very liberated.
And let me see, Pamela.
Well, when you write a book like this particular one, you make a lot of self-discovery. I looked at certain qualities. I always say yes rather than no. I'm kind of a forceful, go-getter kind of person. I mean, why am I like that when some of my friends who look at me and say, I wish I could do that, but I'm too shy, I'm too hesitant to this or that. And so when I looked back, I saw where certain things came from. And I was able to follow it and see how I became the person I am. What I liked about it was I made a lot of insightful awakenings that were pivotal to understanding who I was. I would talk to my sister and say, I'm sorry, I remember this, and it's plagued me for 20 years. She said, what are you talking about? I don't even remember it. And I thought, why have I lived with that for 20 years? And I did that in various things. Things were not exactly as I remembered them in regard to other people, and I got away with a lot, and I made amends for a lot of things. So it tied up a lot of loose ends that made me feel that I finished certain things in my life. And self-awareness is a wonderful thing.
Mike.
I realized after all these years later that of a concept of music as salvation. In other words, as long as the music's playing, everything's all right. It didn't matter at the time, 50 years ago, that we were really cold and wet and hungry and thirsty and had to go to the bathroom. But as long as the music was playing, everything will be fine. And that concept of music as salvation has stayed with me my entire life. To today, at 68, having my first book published at 68. Indeed, as long as the music's playing.
And I'm going to ask Laurie.
Thank you. I think what I rediscovered in the course of writing this book and completing it is Carl Jung talks about archetypes or universal symbols that represent kind of parts of ourself that, again, are cross-cultural, universal, and can be found in all cultures, such as the mother, the healer, the teacher, the trickster, the fool. If you've ever had a tarot reading, you know that the first 22 cards of the major arcana are all archetypal images and figures. And so the archetype that I rediscovered in working on this book is the explorer, because when I was in my 20s, my father told me I was descended from a long line of illiterate peasants and gypsies, and I still enjoy kind of living a little bit more like a gypsy than probably most people, which happens when you lose your home of 20 years. So I was able to step back into what it was like to be the explorer as I was kind of writing about each of these 5 gifts, and to kind of ask myself, what research, there's scientific research on each of these 5 gifts and how they can help to contribute to our mental and emotional and societal well-being. So I really captured and rediscovered that archetype within myself. And even though I can no longer do adventure travel, I can explore the inner world, as Carl Jung calls it, the inner world of concepts and ideas. So thank you.
Thank you. And Marcia?
I rediscovered the status of women when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s by just looking at Evelyn Wood was, although I don't admire her as a figure, I am fascinated by her She was in a very male world of business. Almost all of her business partners and all the successive owners of her company who hired her as a consultant after she and her husband gave up control of it were male. And it made me think of how far we've come, but then again, I also was looking at the very few contemporary works that, besides mine, that have been written about her. And in 1957, she co-authored a book about remedial reading, not about speed reading, with another woman named Marjorie Barrows Westcott. And the two contemporary writers, who I'm sure consider themselves very enlightened fellows about women these days, and they published their works very recently, assumed that Evelyn Wood's co-author was a teacher. And I document everything I'm writing, so I didn't want to just repeat what they had written in their books. I thought, where's the evidence that Marjorie Barrows Westcott was a teacher? And in the Evelyn Wood's archives, I even saw a note from her editor saying, who will be your next collaborator? Maybe, will it be Marjorie, or maybe it should be a teacher? So this indicated that she wasn't a teacher. Well, I found out someone had done a history of her family. I forget if it was the Westcott side or the Barrows side, but it was in the Beinecke Rare Book Library at Yale. So I went on a very rainy day and was probably the only person outside of the Barrows or Westcott family who had ever consulted this history. It was very useful, and I found out that this woman was not a teacher, but an editor in New York. In other words, she was Evelyn Wood's first editor for the remedial textbook, and that these men were just assuming, oh, as a woman writing about education with Evelyn, everybody's, the women are one of three things. They're teachers, they're nurses, or, fill in the blank for the third one, maybe librarians. So I saw that indeed we hadn't come as far as I thought we had.
I have a mixed feeling about rediscovery because I'm sitting here thinking about the fact that I rediscovered the word just do it. And I can tell you that it was scary writing a book because I didn't think I could do it. And I kept thinking about all the things in my life that I had just, even as a tiny little kid, that something would come up and I would say to myself, just do it, Bonnie, just do it. And I thought to myself, as I grew up as a teenager, I went through a lot of life things with my family. And that was the word that just kept coming up for me, just do it. So when I looked at the book and I looked at what I was going to be selecting to write the book, and I thought about all the feelings that I was having about, and the blocks that I was having about, you can't do that. I felt like I was psychologically going to myself, just do it, Bonnie. And when I got the hardcover delivered to me, I just sat there and I thought to myself, Bonnie, you have rediscovered that wonderful word, just do it. Or just the three words, just do it. And I'm very, very blessed for that. And I also just want to thank somebody in the audience who is my husband for helping me. And when I would go to a point where I sank and I thought that I couldn't do it, he would say, you can do this. Come on, you can do it. And I did. So that was a big rediscovery about myself. I'm going to ask you, what inspired you to select experiences to share with your readers? And I'm going to start with Pamela.
What inspired me? Everything inspires me. This is a book about telling stories. I started with stories that affected me, and it started with childhood. When you're a child or a young person or a teenager, everything affects you. Everything is so dramatic, and everything is an issue. You're not tall enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough. You know, boys, it's just such a traumatic time. And I thought, what were the stories that had a lesson that really resonated for other people? And I started telling those stories. It's you know, all our experience does that, and it's a commonality. But what happens when you're 13 for the first time, you're going to a co-ed camp and you feel like an outsider? And yet you're pretty and nice, but you feel like an outsider. And then you go there and you learn how to become an insider, and you realize that a lot of the kids who looked like insiders felt like outsiders. And it transforms the way you look at the world and how you look at relationships. So at the end, you know, as part of the story, it would be, well, what are you going to do now? You know, camp is over, and how do you continue in your strength that you learned, or what happens? How do you continue friendships when everybody gets dispersed? And how do you keep the feeling of being an insider, which is empowering, as opposed to the other? So every story has that kind of edge, and we have very impressive things. I mean, very impressive things with the father and our parents and our mother. And I think it's worth looking at not just what they were, but what you did with them and how you changed yourself. And I've still reacted. I wrote a story about the perfect day. I never thought about, what is a perfect day? I want a perfect day. And I wasn't really thinking about it, but I actually had a perfect day, not just 2 hours of the day, but from the morning till the end. And I thought, why? What made this perfect? And I wrote about it, and this only happened a year ago. And I lived all this time without really knowing what a perfect day was, and it changed the way I looked at the world and the purpose in my life. So these things are meaningful. Thank you.
Laurie, what do you think?
You're asking what inspired me. Fortunately, I have a who inspired me. Dan Rather was always saying, what are you writing? What are you working on? What are you writing? And I told him, I have another career, Dan, and I don't have to write. It's actually a lot easier than writing. And he always says, no, you have to write. You really need to write. So this book kind of came about because I wrote for the Long Island section of the New York Times. I don't know if anyone is here from Long Island, but I used to write the on-the-water stories, and I would go out with the fishermen, the lobstermen. We had an environmental big die-off of the lobster industry on Long Island. And I started to notice in 2007, 2008, that when the high tide came up, that the marsh grass in the South Shore estuary, which is like about 100 miles from east to west along the South Shore, that the marsh grass was completely covered and it was like a lake. And so I could actually see that the sea level was rising. So I started working on a book called All of Nature Speaks, which was based on some very inspiring words that I was taught by a shaman in South America. I did a lot of traveling from 1994 to 2004, would spend part of each year studying with spiritual healers and shamans. And the shamans all had to say, they all had the same message. They would say, all of nature speaks, and you in the north have stopped listening. And so nature is going to get angrier and angrier until you listen. So I started working on this, worked on it actually quite hard. And then in 2012, nature spoke, and I had 4 feet of the Intracoastal Waterway in my living room. And I didn't really kind of put what I was working on away. And then about 6 months or a year later, I decided to put it into a book proposal. And then I had, I guess what professional writers would call a kind of nightmare experience. I had an agent who put me through 8 rewrites of the proposal over a 2-year period. And finally, after revision number 8, I realized that she would actually not get revision number 9 or 10 or 11, and that I should really stop knocking my head against the wall. And so I put it away and started working on something else. Then there was a truck bomb in Lyon. I think you remember it was a 2016. It was Bastille Day. It was a very big, horrible story. And I decided to get out of my own way, put my ego aside, and really work on this book because I thought that it was time and the world needed it. So that's what inspired me. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. And Mike?
Inspiration-wise, it is an easy one for me. I mean, Woodstock was the big bang, and I certainly didn't go to Woodstock as a journalist. I was just an 18-year-old pot-smoking, war-protesting hippie with long hair. So, fine, I experienced this kaleidoscopic, phantasmagoric, psychedelic, unbelievable experience, and when I got home, I realized it took a while to sink in what I had just experience. I mean, my mom was sitting there watching the TV and all the news was bad. I end the book with my mom's tears when I got home. And I kept telling everybody what it was like, what it was like. And then I kept meeting people that kept telling me, ooh, you were there, you were there. So I think my lifelong journalism came as a direct result of telling people about Woodstock. I became a music journalist only 3 years later. I've done nothing my entire life but listen to music and tell people about it. I was able to put 2 kids through school that way. You know, they tell you, find something that you love to do in your life and you'll never have to work a day in your life. Hello.
And Marcia?
Well, I had written a biography about a restaurateur named Patricia Murphy, who used to have Patricia Murphy's Candlelight restaurants here. It was my first biography called Popovers and Candlelight, which was published last year. And I was sifting around for another woman of the 20th century, and Evelyn Wood popped into my head. As my husband said, I can't believe you're the first person to do this. The advertising used to be everywhere, on the radio, TV, in newspapers. She was incredibly famous, and I'm very lucky that I found this engaging topic, and I think, again, it's simply because women are overlooked. Otherwise, it would have been done before.
Kate?
I've always liked writing personal essays, and that kind of led me to teaching a class in personal essay at NYU, which I've been doing for over 20 years. I really like taking events in my life and writing about them and trying to find what is the universal truth, analyzing what happened. What made this experience different for me, and what made it part of the whole big story. So I kind of wrote personal essays for my entire life, and that led to me writing the book. And some of the book was published in personal essay form prior to it coming into the book. So, I mean, the memoir was a progression. It just seemed like, well, I've been writing about myself for my entire life. It's time to write a book. So I guess it went from essay to memoir.
It's interesting. What I think about is that when I wrote my book, it was a very interesting experience because I had been written up in the New York Times. My tree was on the cover of the home section. And it was an amazing experience because I can't tell you how many people came to me with stories about their tree and what they had lived and how they selected their ornaments. And so when it came time for me to write my book, I also would like to share that my husband's a documentary film editor. So I've watched him compose a lot of films and watched him compose a story and watched him engage people and create the stories that would make you stay with it. So that when I selected what I would do with my particular ornaments, I thought about the experience that I had with each of these ornaments and that how they would relate to the people that were reading the book. And it was a little hard initially, and then I thought, then it just all started happening. All these experiences that people had told me about, and also the experience of living and watching a film, and watching a rough cut, and watching another rough cut, and watching music laid in, and watching copy laid in, and then finally seeing a finished film. I thought to myself, that experience is going to help me write a book and understand how to write a book. And so that's how it came together for me from an experience. I'm going to ask some direct questions, and one of the things, Marcia, that I thought was fascinating about your book was all the research you did about the Mormons. And one of the things that was really amazing to me is that by being the moderator, I had the opportunity of skimming through a lot of the books. And reading about the Mormons was amazing. So please share that information.
Yeah, I'm not an expert, but as I said before, I had to get some understanding to understand Evelyn Wood and her husband, who her husband was a Mormon bishop for a while, which is not like a Roman Catholic bishop. It's more like the equivalent of a parish priest. He was responsible for one ward or section of a neighborhood in Salt Lake City. The material and spiritual needs of the people who lived in that neighborhood. And she was very active in the Women's Relief Society. And then he became, in 1938, the mission president in Frankfurt, Germany, under Nazism. And Evelyn and her husband moved to Germany, and I was extremely interested in the accommodations the church made to not be bothered by the Nazis and to be allowed to flourish during that time. So I think I learned more about the experiences of these particular church members at that time in Germany than I did. I'm not an expert on the church, but I did read a number of articles about, one is called Moroni and the Swastika, about the cooperation, as I would call it, between this American-grown church and the Third Reich. But I will say that the church itself was very welcoming to me. I was allowed free reign in the church history library, and they have taken an accounting of their own history to some degree. And so I was very happy to see that. But it was, it's an interesting episode in their lives, and I think lent additional interest to the book.
Fascinating.
Thanks.
Mike, I have a question for you. Your narrative is highlighted with fantastic images throughout the book. How did you make your selection? And were there any rights issues that you had to consider?
I didn't choose any of the pictures. I had a fabulous editor. His name was Paul Kennedy. He chose all 250 pictures. He wrote all the photo captions. He had a deal with Getty Images, who had a lot of these pictures. I supplied some pictures of some of the people that I knew at the time that went to Woodstock. The picture of myself at 18 that my mom took right before I left. But the fascinating juxtaposition of art with the prose on each page, he did such a masterful job. He made my book better. I mean, he censored me, and I was upset with him, but he made it more readable. So as far as the art's concerned, I can't take any credit for the art.
Okay. It's really great. And if you look at the cover, it's a terrific cover, too. Laurie, one of the things that I thought was really great about your book was, believe it or not, the end. And that the end was you had this pull-out page that you could carry with you.
Oh, right.
And it was called a fold-up guide.
Right.
And so I think that's what's wonderful about buying it in paper, because you have the fold-out guide. Could you talk about that?
Yes, it's actually here. It's the appendix. It's called Dr. Laurie's Pocket Guide to Self-Care under Acute Stress Situations. One of the trainings that I've taken with the Critical Incident Stress Management Foundation, which is a movement within the first responder community around the world to help rescue workers and police and military personnel to debrief after they go on a call that's very disturbing, usually where it results in a child getting killed or a child getting shot or wounded. And so it's we're very much concerned with helping people to understand that the symptoms of acute stress after a catastrophe. It doesn't mean that you're not a professional, and it doesn't mean that you're not weak, and it doesn't mean that you're vulnerable. It means that you're being flooded with stress hormones, and there are certain things you need to recognize for your own health and well-being. And so what I did was I took a handout that had been developed by a SWAT team in Georgia, and I took some of their findings. These are things that they tell people to do when, for the first 42, 72 hours after an event. So I designed it so that you can rip it out of the book, and then on the other side, you fold it into quarters, and then you can stick it in your pocket, because that's how the original handout was designed. So it's designed for you to keep it in your wallet, give it to your kid. You can take pictures of it and put it on your phone if you prefer to do things that way. But it's designed to be, immediate, available, and effective. And it has some basic tips on rest, exercise, water, hydration. The most important thing, we always tell people is don't isolate. Stay with other people. Don't eat alone. Make sure that you have people around who you can talk to, and keep telling your story for as many times or as often as you need to. So those are all what I call the emotional first aid tools or techniques that are on this little one-page handout that you can take with you. Thank you.
Pamela, in looking at all the moments that you write about in your book, what do you think was the most profound for you? Just one.
Let's see. Well, I guess they were all profound at different times of my life. I think I would pick, though, the one that actually made me write the book, because it was the start of everything. It was an experience when I was 16 years old. I was watching maybe 15. I was watching television, Milton Berle, Tuesday night, Texaco Star Theater. My father worked 20 hours a day, and he would come home from work. He had his own business, and he'd work his files. And my mother and I would just lounge around while he was doing his files. And in the middle of the program, he never asked her for a favor ever. He turned to her and said, "Sweetheart, would you get me a glass of water?" And she said, "No, I'm busy." And I wanted to cry. I was so upset. She was pampered and spoiled, wouldn't get him water, but I didn't either. And I looked at it, and years later, why didn't I get up and get him a glass of water? Well, I was a little afraid of her. I didn't know what the dynamics were. I don't know. I adored my father. It was a very profound experience. That's what made me write the book. A few years later, I was married and pregnant with the son who carried his name. And I'm at the funeral, and his casket's there, and I'm crying, and people are saying, poor Pamela, what a wonderful man he was, what a wonderful father. And I thought, they could never know that I'm crying because I didn't get him that glass of water, and I'm crying because I never said I was sorry. And that has haunted me forever. It's stuff like that. Very ordinary experience. That's what these are that are life-altering. So that's what made me write the book. I had to get it down, and I had to look at it and figure out why I didn't do it. And it has made me a much better person. I'm more mindful, I'm more caring about people, and I don't let things go anymore. I think about ordinary things. So I think that was it. Thanks.
And I would like to say that I'm really glad that she mentioned that particular experience, because that was something that really got me in her book. And Kate, one of the things that I've read about is that people are saying they compared your book to Eat, Pray, Love or Sex and the City. And I was wondering how you feel about that. Which way do you think your book goes?
I think it's more, I called it the low budget queer Eat, Pray, Love. Low budget because I did not go to any exotic places. I went to the Omega Institute upstate. I didn't go to India or Italy. I think that's where Liz Gilbert went. But I was definitely on a spiritual quest to heal my life. So I think it kind of ties into that a little more than Sex and the City, although I thought that was a nice compliment.
I'll just share one thing that I forgot to mention with my own life is that my tree came to me through my husband, and we were living together. I came home one night from Lord and Taylor, where I was working, and there was a green tree in our apartment. And standing there was our friend Eli and Bob, and they looked at me with a lot of pride, and Bob said, "This is your Christmas present." And it was a fresh tree, and underneath it was a couple of boxes from Woolworths of Christmas ornaments, but they were very selected, the colors were very specific, and I could tell, as Bob then was an architect, that it was very planned. Well, needless to say, that 5-foot tree that was 75 ornaments became an 8-foot tree with almost 3,000 ornaments. And I would like to share that that is a very, very wonderful experience because a live-in boyfriend became my husband. And every year when we set up our tree, he climbs up the ladder and I direct him as to where the ornament should be placed at the top of the tree. Below below the area that I can reach, let's put it that way, above the area that I can reach. And our marriage has lasted a very long time, and I would like to say that he's a saint because of what he goes through. It takes me 4 days to all the stories are in the book. It takes me 4 days to decorate the tree, and the tree selection is very hard because I have to make sure it's all cut. But I would like to celebrate one thing with all of you, is that this year is the 45th anniversary of our tree. And I'm getting emotional, but he's over here in the audience. And also my dear friends, Linda and Krista, who are also wonderful givers of my ornaments for my tree, are here in the audience as well. So I just wanted to celebrate with you this event because it was very important to me. And also the fact that we're talking about my book here at this wonderful anniversary. Yes. Bob? This is now the time for us to have a great Q&A. I know that I'm sure you all have a lot of questions for our wonderful authors who have shared so much about their books with us. So I'm opening the audience to anybody who'd like to ask a question.
Did you have to do self-publishing for your books, or were you able, even if you hadn't published before, to get an editor and to go the traditional publishing route? Just as someone who would like to start a writing project, I have my own interest in that.
My book, can I answer? My book was published by a small independent press called Heliotrope Books. It's kind of an avant-garde press in the East Village, which was a perfect fit for my book because it takes place almost entirely in the village. I did look for an agent, and I wasn't having success. I could have kept going, but someone referred me to this publisher, and I said, let me meet with her, and we hit it off, and I liked her a lot, and she offered me a contract, and so I went with Heliotrope Books, and I have no regrets. One of the advantages of having a small press is that you have a lot more control over the way your book comes out. So I'm very happy with how everything turned out. I could have kept looking for an agent, but I decided to go with the offer I got. So it's not self-published, to answer your question.
Yeah, hi. This is for Mike Greenblatt. So you've spent your whole life interviewing and listening to music and being backstage and having all these experiences with amazing rock and other music stars. So I'm just wondering, what is like a story that you chose to put into the book that, you know, that you can't even believe that it happened to you?
I think that the stories that didn't make the book were the ones that I can't believe happened to me. As I said, I was heavily censored, and ultimately it was a good thing. But my interactions with people in my whole career, including a couple of Stones, a couple of Beatles, couple of heavy metal guys, a lot of country guys. I sort of weaved a backstory in the book. He took it all out. But that's okay, because the things that I liked the most sometimes were the things that were told to me by other people that I had no idea about, like how Janis Joplin wanted to have sex with Bruce Springsteen. I mean, I didn't know that. She wanted to have sex with Clive Davis at Columbia Records, and Chris Christopherson and Dick Cavett. And some she did, and some she was busy. Some she did, and some she didn't. But the point is that he kept in certain things, and he took out certain things. So it's a tough question to answer, young lady.
Okay. Oh. Yeah, hold on. So Mike kind of addressed this, but my question is to all of you on the panel, having done the research that you did for each of your books, were there things that you found out that you would have rather not known?
In my case, it was a question of how much do I want to reveal. I mean, I'm writing about a personal relationship that I was in for 26 years. So it wasn't so much finding out. I mean, it was more, well, so there was some. It was more like how much do I want to say and how much do I want to keep to myself. That was a really big decision. And I pretty much put it all out there. But there were a few things I didn't.
I would say, yeah, of course there are things. When you're introspective, you're always going to find things that you don't kind of like. But if it makes a good story and if you've learned from it, and you can learn from negative things as well as positive things. And who wants to read a book that's all positive and happy-go-lucky? You learn from the difficult stuff, face it, and become better for it. Do something about it. So I welcome whatever.
Can I add to that, since my book is very personal and it's a memoir? One of the things I learned from my writing group is that, you know, if you're writing about a breakup, you cannot just be like bashing your ex. You have to come up with good stuff because, I mean, hey, you were with this person for all this time. So you also have to be self-deprecating about yourself. Like, well, what did I miss? I missed all these clues. Hello. So I think that this is one of the things I learned. If you can kind of be self-deprecating about yourself, you can get away with saying bad stuff about other people, too.
I agree.
Yes, I'm sorry, can you tell me the question? Can you rephrase the question for me? It was about, are there things that I wished I hadn't learned?
Yeah, through your research,
Yeah.
things that you wish you probably would have been better off not knowing.
Well, I think there's a question of whether or not, you know, looking back that the, you know, being an explorer and being an adventure reporter and going into places that were risky, you know, even back in the 70s. Probably, you know, when I would read some of the early stuff, I would think, you know, you're really lucky you got out alive. But I can't say that there's anything that I wished I didn't learn or I wish I didn't know. I felt I have a tremendous empathy for the people who had the courage to share their stories with me for this book, especially the family members who lost people on September 11th. It's very, very hard for them to talk about the very intimate losses that they went through and to be able to share them for us, because you know, we are all, I think, still traumatized. You know, we have a collective wound that we don't talk about, but it's huge, and it has changed us as a people, it's changed us as a culture and as a society, and I really felt that it was so important that the several people who were willing to share the loss of their sister-in-law, the loss of their husband, the loss of their father, in a very personal way. It's difficult to listen, but then I would say to myself, but you're just listening, you know, they had to live through it, and they have the courage to come out and share this with you. So I think, you know, there are things that we can learn from each other about these very painful experiences. And I think that there's a balancing act involved. Great question, thank you.
For Marcia. Trying to remember her name. Evelyn Wood. Now, was she aware that this was not succeeding, and is she a real charlatan? Like, she kind of knew, but didn't, because she must have had a lot of collaborators around in order to prevent this information from coming out, that it wasn't a successful reading. It's just curious to me of all these years, and that hasn't been revealed. I mean, did she herself know she was a charlatan?
Well, I think that you can be a scammer without admitting to yourself that you are. I think that when she went into it, she started in Utah with a very popular course at the University of Utah, where she was a part-timer, and she made much more extravagant claims for her results than other instructors who had taught the same course for years. You know, other people would say, if you take this course, you might improve, you know, you might double your reading speed. Most of us read about 250 to 300 words a minute. So to say that you'll double it to 600 words per minute, usually with material that is nonfiction, something where you're already familiar with the subject, yes, you might be able to do that. But she went in and made, you know, far more extravagant claims that it would go up to 10 times the speed. Well, a lot of people took the class, and this is in 1959. Again, we're in the Cold War. We're in the space race and the rat race. It was a very competitive time. So a lot of the students, and to this day, I go places where people say, yes, I could read 3,000 words per minute and not lose any comprehension. And they'll insist that it's true. So there was sort of this group, you know, people sort of drinking the Kool-Aid together, where she believed it, they believed it, everybody was happy. When people weren't so happy with the results, it was always something's wrong with you, or something's wrong. You know, people will do the same thing with any kind of magic fix, or, you know, divining rods will find water underground, except when they don't, because there's something, it's a cloudy day, or the person using the divining rod isn't feeling well. You know, you could have, psychics could say the same thing. There are always all these outs. So once it was, you know, the anecdotal evidence was good at the time because everybody wanted it to work. She and her husband commercialized it without testing it. You know what, maybe it would have been fine if it had stayed in a school setting where you're paying very low in-state tuition at the University of Utah. But they took it to Washington. They always charged what would be in today's dollars over $1,000 for a 30-hour course. It was not cheap. At that point, other reading experts and scientists started saying, I don't believe it, but maybe you found something that works. Can we come down and test your students? She always refused testing. So working from that, I would say, she saw what she wanted to see, and she refused to let her students be tested. Eventually, there were enough graduates, because 1 million people took this course, that there were volunteers for testing, and did not stand up to scientific scrutiny.
Hi, Dr. Nadel. Good to hear you. You're both a journalist and a psychotherapist. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can
You're
hear
both
you.
a journalist and a psychotherapist. Yeah. And what I've observed about you is that you're a person of action. You know, how does that work? I mean, you actually help people. You go to these situations where they're very tough, and you're not just there getting a story, or you're not just there, you know, doing kumbaya. You're actually helping them. And where did that come from?
Well, I think, you know, that's an excellent question, because I still sometimes, I do nonfiction writing. Occasionally, I have a new piece that is being edited for New York Times travel section. So I'm not a full-time journalist. I'm a full-time therapist, and journalism is I think it's something that's just in my blood, and I welcome opportunities to do stories. But the stories that I write about are more of kind of adventure stories. They're feature stories. And the work that I do in trauma work, I've gotten invited actually by organizations because I have specific training in different types of techniques, interventions, and also the work of the Critical Incident Stress Foundation. So I work on teams with other people. I don't just show up and say, hey, I'm here, can I help you? So it's kind of a coordinated effort. But thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Or not.
Yes.
I'd like to take Evelyn Wood now so I could read all your books, because each one of you were so fascinating, your stories. Thank you so much. I read Bonnie's book and it was charming, and it really, my Christmas tree and my experiences were magical at Christmas, and it resonated so much with me, and it was wonderful. I have a question for each of you, but I don't know. I can't. Mike, what kind of music do you listen to now? I'm curious.
There's only 2 kinds of music.
I'm ready.
There you go.
Good and
She got
bad.
it. She got it like that. Yeah,
Oh,
good and
oh.
bad. And there's good and bad in every single possible genre of music. I have a rotation at home, which I haven't. My rotation is I listen to whatever is next. I'm a country, jazz, heavy metal, Latin, gospel, bluegrass, folk, rock and roll, blues. It don't matter. I classical. I don't like opera. Okay, I can't get past the sound. I'm sorry, but my rotation is multi-genre. I remain multi-genre. And I love it all. I mean, I have certain favorites: Paul Simon, Delbert McClinton, Leonard Cohen, the Kinks. But yeah, I listen to it all.
Has your taste changed since you were
Yes.
since you were a hippie?
Yeah, my aptitude for rock atrophied in the 80s, and my adventurism blossomed in other genres. I just found that there was nothing new under the sun. I can't even name a 90s rock band that I like. I don't understand U2 or grunge. Punk and metal were cool, but mostly because I was editor of Metal Maniacs, I had to learn to love it, and I did. But I don't listen to that much of it anymore. But yeah, the rock that I fall on is tried and true old kind of rock. But jazz and Latin and gospel and country and, it's all there. You just got to find it.
Thank you.
We have time for 1 more question. All right, can we get some final thoughts from our authors here?
There's one thing that we didn't cover that was a question that I wanted just to bring up a little bit, is getting a book published. And you asked the question, and I was not self-published. I did, Penguin Random House was my publisher. But I have to acknowledge that I knew nothing about publishing, and I was very, very blessed to have an incredible agent whose name was Marian Alschiller. And then I also had a great editor whose name was Meg Leader. And both of them came to me, and I have very experienced in retail. I've done retail all my life, and I knew nothing about publishing. And I was very fortunate to have 2 women who really guided me in that path. But I acknowledge, if you can, I think an agent is very important, and I think that the best proposal you do and the most thought that you put into your proposal is something that will really sell your book. I mean, again, my concentration is pictorial, and I picked all the pictures myself and selected all the ornaments myself. So it was a different experience, but I encourage you. It's a very, very interesting road to go on, and I acknowledge you if you want to go through that path. And we'd like to have last comments from the different authors about your experience here, and I thank you very much for being here. I'll start from Marcia.
Yeah, I have a publisher, a medium-sized publisher, Chicago Review Press, and I do have an agent. I used to write mystery novels a long time ago. It was always a battle to get published. It's not my favorite part of writing. I've had many different agents, all different publishers. It's always, I would like to find a home. And, I'm doing another proposal that's almost finished right now, and I'm scared to show it to my agent who handled this book because he might not like the new book. And all I can say is keep trying. It was a great thing. It's a great thing to be retired. I'm a retired New York City school teacher, so I can do this full time. And it's a luxury to write all the time, but I try to push that marketing and placing my book for publication out of my mind while I'm writing. I just enjoy the writing.
I've never had an agent in my life. I tried. It was rejected. My original book proposal, Nobody You Know, was about me, and it was an ironic title because there certainly was plenty of people you know in my memoir. But I write for Goldmine magazine, and the editor, Pat Prince, and me became fast friends, and he always loved my Woodstock stories. So the other part of Krause Publications that put out this magazine was a book division, and they did one in 2009 for the 40th anniversary. So he suggested that I do the one for the 50th anniversary. And they made me an offer, and I said okay, and I did the book. It sort of just fell in my lap.
It's hard to sum up a passion that you have. I was actually an interior designer for 30 years. And I started writing about 20 years ago, and because I just had to start writing. I had to do it no matter what, and I gave up everything in my life, and I started to devote myself to this. And I say, like anything else, if you really want something, you have to do it. And you have to want it. You can't just think how nice it would be if I could do it. You have to do it. And in terms of finding people, there are so many places today, and organizations and schools and colleges all around the cities writing workshops, writing courses, and how to find publishers. The Jewish Community Center has stuff, the 92nd Street Y has stuff. Go to these things and you find out how these are done. You network, you meet people, and you can share with other writers. But if you want to do it, you have to do it. You can't like anything. Just don't talk about it. Get into it, and it's fabulous. Hard, but fabulous.
I totally second what Pamela said, and as I said, I teach at NYU, School of Professional Studies, NYU, the New School. There's tons of courses that will help you. But if you want to write a book or get published, just do it. I was working full-time as a college teacher when I wrote my book, so I was writing and teaching at the same time. But you really have to want it, but there are a lot of resources. That's one of the great things about living in New York. And I also just want to say thank you to Senior Planet and to Aaron for putting on this wonderful event.
Yes, I'd like to
second.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to second that too. Thank you.
And
Thank
to
you.
Aaron, who
Thank you,
really
Aaron.
did a
Yeah.
lot of work here.
Yes. So I've been writing professionally since I'm 17 or 18. And I think Molière, the French playwright, said that writing is like prostitution. First you do it for love, and then you do it for a few friends, and finally you do it for money. I'm still waiting for the money. So, I think of it as a compulsion. I told my brother, if I ever tell you I'm writing another book, you have permission to kill me. It's an obsessive relationship. That's why I really love having my other career in psychotherapy. You do have to write this book, I had to spend a lot of time literally in solitary. Days and days of really not speaking to anyone except over the phone. I would go out twice a week. I would say hello to the lady in the post office. I would say hello to the lady in the bank. Then I'd go to the supermarket, and then I would go back to the desk. So I like spending time by myself, but this really felt like I was in solitary. And then when the book launched, you have to become an extrovert. You have to become an entertainer. And the thing about this book that, a couple of things are interesting, but this was rejected once I found my former agent who really got the book and said, yes, I can sell this book, asked me to clean it up a little bit, and immediately sent out the proposal. It was rejected by 15 or 16 publishers. And one of the things that they said was that they loved the way it was written and they thought it was relevant, but that the author didn't have a sufficient platform to be able to promote the book. And when they're talking about platform, when you go to an agent or you go to an editor, the first thing they do is they plug in your name to see whether you have following on Facebook, nowadays Instagram or Twitter. And if you don't have a lot of people, by which I have 25,000 connections on LinkedIn and a few thousand on Twitter and Instagram. I'm Facebook phobic because years ago when I was had a podcast, I was building my global media platform, and one of my Facebook friends hacked into my AOL email account and managed to impersonate me to my financial advisor and hacked into my financial accounts, launching a huge FBI cyber investigation and making me forever Facebook phobic. So when people say, are you on Facebook? The answer is, thank God, no. But it works for a lot of people. So I'm just saying that was my experience. What I have learned to do, and what I would suggest that you do if you don't like to spend a lot of time on social media, is perhaps to connect with people who do enjoy doing it and who do have a large following, and ask them if they would help to promote your book when you do have one. And then when you write your proposal, and you have to write a section on how are you going to promote the book or market the book, you can say that you have joint marketing partners. And that with your joint marketing partners, you can expand your reach. If you have 5 people, each of whom has 10,000 followers, which is really not that much for people who are on social media an hour or 2 a day and use it professionally, you now have 50,000 connections with your joint marketing partners. So that's how I do it. I find it works really well. I'm happy I cross-promote for people, but I think you have to think about who is your audience and how are you going to market it at the same time that you start writing. That's what I've learned the hard way, especially the last 5 years.
Thank you very much, Laurie. And I would like to say that what she just said was brilliant, and everybody should savor her wisdom, because it's very, very true. Anyway, I'd like to thank everyone for being here tonight and for joining us. And to everybody who's watching us online, thank you for watching. And for those of us that are here, the authors' books are for sale. And they're for sale in the back room. So please join us and enjoy. You can personally talk to the authors as well. So thank you again for all your support and being here. And thank you for these wonderful, wonderful authors. They're just brilliant. So thank you.
Thank you.